The final 4 races of 2024 will decide everything, but Verstappen's path is clouded with challenges. To make matters worse, his next race kicks off with a penalty after Red Bull announced some unexpected news: he's lost 10 points in his fight with Lando Norris. Verstappen now faces the daunting task of starting the Brazilian Grand Prix with a grid penalty following an engine replacement. As his own team admits, things aren't looking great for the Dutch driver. Verstappen has faced criticism before, with many suggesting that he competes more aggressively against Norris compared to other rivals. When questioned about this, Verstappen firmly dismissed the idea, much like he did during his battles with Lewis Hamilton back in 2021. That season saw intense clashes, including the infamous incident in Turn 4 at the Brazilian GP, sparking an electrifying championship showdown. Yet, Mexico further highlighted Verstappen's tendency to push the limits when racing against his closest challengers. A great example lies in the way Carlos Sainz overtook Verstappen in Turn 1 without much resistance. Instead of blocking the move, Verstappen aimed for a counterattack in Turns 2 and 3, only to find Sainz perfectly prepared for it. Perhaps Verstappen realized that the Ferrari would get ahead no matter what, or maybe he believed he could outsmart Sainz later. Either way, his approach to racing against Norris has raised eyebrows. When it comes to Norris, things have been far more unpredictable. On 2 separate occasions, Verstappen seemed to push the McLaren driver to the edge, almost as if he was testing Norris's limits, hoping he would back down. While fans crave hard-fought competition, Verstappen's tactics raise an interesting question: can Norris take advantage of this aggressive approach? Verstappen's encounters with Norris fall into what many describe as a gray area of racing etiquette. Of the 2 recent incidents, the second was particularly unusual. Verstappen forced Norris off the track, counting on the McLaren driver to step back. This isn't about asking Verstappen to change his driving style. He's known for being relentless, and the fans love seeing competitive, hard but fair racing. As Mercedes has shown, Verstappen can race cleanly when he wants to. But whenever he catches a glimpse of a rival in his mirrors, it seems to trigger a competitive itch that he just can't resist scratching. Now the real question is, how should Norris respond? If Verstappen continues with these tactics, Norris must learn to turn them to his advantage. We saw hints of this strategy in Mexico, where Norris tried to bait Verstappen into making mistakes. Austin's dramatic moments further revealed some of the inconsistencies in racing rules, yet also reinforced them. No major regulatory changes were implemented. Take Turn 4, for instance, now that the being alongside at the apex rule has been clarified. Norris knows he has to stick close when attempting an overtake on Verstappen. The outside pass attempt was daring, but it mirrored Verstappen's aggressive braking in Turn 12 at Coda. Both drivers managed to find space, forcing Verstappen to make a critical choice: concede the inside line to Norris or risk pushing him off the track entirely. Predictably, Verstappen chose the latter. Norris, who briefly took the lead after going off track, allowed Carlos Sainz to regain the position. Verstappen, however, wasn't as forgiving. He expected Norris to yield as well, assuming he had gained the advantage by leaving the track. When that didn't happen, Verstappen found himself with 2 options: wait for his team to intervene or take matters into his own hands. This aggressive tendency presents a weakness that Norris can exploit. By drawing Verstappen into situations where he risks penalties without affecting his own race, Norris could effectively use Verstappen's competitive nature against him. With just 4 races left and a 47-point gap to close, it's a steep hill to climb. But the key might lie in making Verstappen his own worst enemy. Brazil's Turn 4 could be the perfect battleground if the 2 drivers find themselves side by side. And given Verstappen's engine penalty, an on-track encounter is more likely than not. However, the real complication lies with Verstappen's recent struggles. During the Mexico Grand Prix, he faced engine-related issues, prompting Red Bull to install a replacement power unit for the rest of the weekend. Though the new engine ran without further issues, the added mileage took a toll on its performance. Before DRS activation, Verstappen's top speed was noticeably slower, clocking in at just 321.4 km/h, significantly behind teammate Sergio Perez's 323.4 km/h. Verstappen was among the slowest drivers in the first speed trap, hitting only 299.8 km/h compared to Perez's 303.1 km/h and Norris's impressive 307.9 km/h. Red Bull is already under pressure, struggling to match the race pace of Ferrari and McLaren. The team knows they must gamble on a fresh power unit to boost Verstappen's chances. And what better place to take that risk than Interlagos? The circuit offers plenty of opportunities for overtaking, which makes it a sensible venue for absorbing a grid penalty. Still, Red Bull's concerns are mounting not just over penalties but also over their inability to unlock tire performance. As Motorsport advisor Helmut Marko admitted, "We couldn't get either the medium or hard tires to work properly in Mexico, and it hurt us badly." Marko further revealed that the engine used during the Mexico race was only intended for practice sessions, not for competitive racing. The engine we ran wasn't supposed to be in the car during a race weekend, and older engines naturally lose performance over time, he explained. A penalty for an engine change would result in a 5-place grid drop manageable at a circuit like Interlagos, where overtaking is relatively straightforward. However, Marko emphasized we were losing between 3 to 8 km/h on the straights, and that's something we can't ignore. Despite the challenges, Verstappen still holds a 47-point lead over Norris in the championship standings. Any engine penalty will only affect the grid position for the main race on Sunday, leaving the sprint race on Saturday unaffected. Even with the grid drop, Verstappen will be banking on Norris making a mistake during qualifying, giving him a chance to minimize the damage. Meanwhile, avoiding additional penalties will be critical for Verstappen this weekend, something McLaren CEO Zak Brown is hoping won't go in the Dutchman's favor. Brown has been vocal about Verstappen's aggressive racing tactics, particularly during the Mexican Grand Prix. He feels the penalties handed down were insufficient to curb Verstappen's conduct. Brown stated, "His actions are becoming a bit excessive. The FIA stewards did well, but I believe the penalties could have been more severe. It's time for some fair, clean racing in these final races." The tensions between Norris and Verstappen have been brewing for some time. Just a week prior, Norris received a 5-second penalty at the U.S. Grand Prix for overtaking Verstappen off track in the closing laps. McLaren's appeal to the FIA was denied, leaving many within the team frustrated. After the race in Mexico, Zak Brown reiterated his belief that Verstappen's penalties were not strict enough, advocating for more consistent and fair rulings going forward. Brown even hinted that McLaren could escalate the matter to FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem if Verstappen's behavior continues. However, he remains hopeful that the FIA stewards will manage the situation properly, saying, "I believe the stewards are doing their job. They made the right calls in Mexico, and I trust they'll keep things in check." Meanwhile, McLaren is inching closer to their first Constructors' Championship since 1998, though Ferrari has narrowed the gap to just 29 points after back-to-back wins. Despite Red Bull being 54 points behind the leaders, Brown refuses to count them out, acknowledging their ability to turn things around. "It's tighter than we'd like, but it's thrilling for Formula One fans to witness Ferrari and McLaren fighting for the championship," he remarked. As the season draws to a close, all eyes are on the final races in Brazil, Las Vegas, Qatar, and Abu Dhabi. Red Bull's chances largely depend on whether Sergio Perez can find his form again and whether Verstappen can avoid further penalties. The battle between Norris and Verstappen will also be pivotal. Will Verstappen manage to stay ahead, or will Norris exploit his aggressive nature to close the gap? What do you think? Can Verstappen overcome his grid penalties and take the fight to Norris once more? Or will McLaren's rising momentum finally halt Red Bull's dominance? Share your thoughts in the comments below. This title race is far from over.